and go to our slide presentation. The goal is to finish chapter 16 and 17 today and Friday. So we've got that done before turkey and pumpkin pie. And then we come back with 1 week left, and we finish the class project and we go over chapter 18 and we finish all the chapters. Economic policy. This outline will be kind of the first one that I've been able to put together that follows the chapter pretty closely, and I've got all the page numbers on here. What is the role of government in our economy? Some people would say, and we'll see them later, government should not even be involved in the economy. And if so, it needs to be very, very minimal. But we are going to see that there are some things that we do need, like we need to have some rules for exchanging goods. We need to have clear definitions of what property is and who has the rights to property. What if we make a contract with somebody and they break the contract? Who's going to make sure that they enforce it? And then we need a common currency. It used to be that states printed their own money, or maybe you'd take your beaver pelts to the trading post and you would trade so many beaver pelts for milk and eggs and flour. So the government, does these things, sets up a currency system, sets rules and laws and definitions for all of these elements that we have in our economic financial dealings. What is an economy? It's basically a system in which a nation and all the levels of government underneath the federal level make their economic choices. They make choices on how we're going to use our natural resources, selling, importing, exporting, trading, and then what kinds of goods and items we're going to produce with those natural resources, or what kind of services will be offered. When we talk about economic policy, we see the government fulfilling several roles, such as managing the economy, protecting individual property and individual welfare, bringing in regulation. Some individuals and companies used to have monopolies and they would put other people out of business. Well, we've kind of done away with that, and we have regulations. And then the government provides public goods which will help the market, things that the market cannot provide. So we're going to begin with, now, if you haven't outlined your chapter yet, I've kind of got this chapter easily outlined. Well, somewhat easily. I have the big sections here highlighted. So section 1 talks about what are the goals of an economic policy. There's 4 goals. These are found on pages 583 through 590. Excuse me. Goal number 1 is to promote a stable market or a stable economy. Instability is not good. And the primary way that they promote a stable economy or a stable market is providing public goods. That is things and services that all of the public can make use of. And we're talking about things like the internet, the interstate highway system, by which people can transport their goods. There are also waterways like ports and barges, and then the railroad system. And today we have the airways. These are goods, and these things provide services to help our markets stay stable. Number 2, promoting economic growth or prosperity. You'll find on the middle of page 584, or basically on the right at the beginning of the bottom 1/3 of the page, 3 goals that the government has in promoting economic growth or prosperity. Promoting business, supporting and promoting technological innovation, advancements, and then promoting and providing for the workforce to be efficient, skilled, educated. So one way that they promote business ties back into number 1. All of the infrastructure needs that promote the markets. Having good highways, good bridges, good canals, good railroad systems, all those things promotes business. Governments the government has established societies or research institutes to help with the sciences, with medical research. This is all to support innovation and advancement. And then in this area here, helping the workforce become educated and skilled, in the area of immigration, which is a hot topic today, but people who want to come to our country and work have always been, I say always, pretty much been welcomed with open arms. If you're willing to come and work, then the government will help you get into the country and help you get employment. The government also provides money and grants and tax breaks to those who are furthering their education and their skills to help them in their workplace. So these are the three ways that three of the ways that our government promotes economic prosperity. Also, our government, two other areas in this, two other ways in this area of promoting economic prosperity is the government promotes, for people to have full employment. If you watch the news, they talk about the unemployment level and how many jobs were added or how many jobs were lost this past month. The government tracks that, and they want to help as many people find employment as possible. The employment rate, I'm wanting to say in the 70s, the unemployment rate, in the 70s had gotten close to 20%. And even going back before that to the Great Depression, over 15% of people were unemployed. And that's when FDR, initiated all of his government programs to help people get work. And so since that time, the government has been involved in helping more and more people find employment. And then the fifth way that the government promotes economic prosperity is to keep inflation down in the economy. Basically, inflation deals with how much goods cost. For those of you who drive, and if you have to pay for your own gas, your parents don't pay for your gas, you will have noticed that gas prices have gone up. That's inflation. The other day I pulled into the, what's up, person at Rattan? The other day I pulled into a Brahms. Who gives a thumbs up to Brahms? That's right. So I was at the nice Brahms in McAllister, wanting a burger and fry and a cherry pie. And does anybody know about that country song? Burgers and fries and cherry pies. Anyway, I digress. I got the 3rd pound cheeseburger with fries. You know how much it is now? It's like $8.59. Used to be like $6. So inflation is going up right now. So the government, in order to promote economic prosperity, tries to keep that inflation down. By the way, speaking of songs, I have now posted the 2nd version of Last Christmas, the Taylor Swift.
I watched it before class. I watched it and I was like, please don't be another Rick roll. And it wasn't.
No, I'm really doing the Last Christmas thing. So, but you have to watch the first one too. So you guys got to email me your ratings of them. I need to know. I think so far only Ella has done that. And she was really on the ball. She listened to all these other songs that I'm not even going to use. Anyway, that's okay. So we want to keep the inflation down. Thank you, government people, for doing that. All right, a third goal for the government in economic policy is to be a promoter of business. This starts on page 587. What do they do to promote businesses? Well, they provide finances through special kinds of banks. They offer incentives to businesses. Again, they create infrastructure such as highways, canals, things like that. They they develop areas where there can be no industry. Small businesses can set up in those districts, but big industries cannot. And then they establish districts or industrial centers for assisting. If you guys have ever been to Poto coming from Worcester, if you know where the softball fields are, the baseball fields on the right before that is the Poto Industrial Park, where small industries are set up. Our government has established the Department of Labor to be a specific branch for small businesses. But also the Department of Labor makes sure that businesses follow safety guidelines, make sure they are at least offering minimum wage, make sure that they have unemployment insurance in case someone loses their job, or reemployment services. You can see here the Department of Labor is to foster, promote, and develop the well-being of wage earners, job seekers, and retirees of the United States. They are also to improve working conditions, right? If you work in a factory, you will have, sometimes you will have safety inspectors. They advance opportunities for profitable employment. And they make sure that people who are in the labor force, that their rights are being protected from the management. Any questions so far? The fourth and final goal of economic policy is basically, in one word, regulation. Regulation. Page 588 through 601. And there are several areas that they work to regulate. One area we mentioned is regulating between the managers and the employees. Make sure that the employees aren't being taken advantage of. Also, make sure that there are safety working areas. So they regulate the workspace. This goes back, and this is mentioned in your textbook, to the early 1900s. A book came out called The Jungle, and it basically dealt with the poor working conditions, especially in Chicago meat factories. Now, I don't know if you guys are aware of the ingredients of hot dogs, but whatever they put in hot dogs today is nothing compared to what they were putting in meat back in the early 1900s. So they regulate the workspace to make sure it's safe, sanitized. not only do they regulate between management and employees, we also have agencies that regulate business between major companies. And another important area is regulating. Now, a part of that regulating the old meat factories was not only to provide a safe working environment for the employees, but to make sure consumers got safe products. So regulating to protect employees, regulating to protect consumers, regulating between businesses so there's not a monopoly. And then another area is regulation to protect the environment. Now, this big section in the slides is not in your textbook, but I wanted to include it. And I'll tell you why in a moment. But we have big industries that produce textiles and other industrial items that we need. And you guys have seen the big factories billowing out smoke and pollution. And at one time they were any kind of factories that were set up by a river, they were dumping their waste into the river. So it was polluting and killing the environment. So a part of the government, and again, this is related to the economic policy, but it's to make sure that our companies and our industries are not destroying the environment. And so there's regulation with the environment. Deals with land, water, and air. Reducing chemical fertilizers and pesticides, recycling, reusing materials, and then cutting down on deforestation are methods to help the soil and the land resources. And then there's other things here on how they're helping with the water and the air. So that's all yours to look at, carbon emissions. Let's move on to section 2. I think you guys get the idea, though, that a part of economic policy is to regulate. Any questions on section 1? What are the tools of economic policy? That's what we're talking about in section 2, the tools. Four things that are listed in our textbook: fiscal policy, monetary policy, trade policy, and regulation and antitrust policy. So all of these policies are the tools in the toolbox that our government has. Let's begin with these first two that at first they look like they might be identical, but they're a little different. I'm going to start with the bottom one, fiscal policy, because that's the one listed first in the textbook. This is where the government uses things like taxation, currency, and spending procedures, spending laws, spending powers. And the use of taxation and their spending is to affect the economy. They're primarily used to bring about economic growth or prosperity, but they can also be used, which a lot of people on the left today want to do, redistribute wealth. One example would be wanting to really tax the super rich people, like with a 90% tax. What are the tools in the fiscal policy toolbox? Taxation. Whatever that word is, basically, they can print more money. The government can borrow money. The government can use money that's in the reserves, maybe like take it out of the reserves and pump it into the economy, or they can make money by selling assets that they have. These are two types of fiscal policy. We're going to focus on, well, let's go ahead and go over both of them. Demand side economics, where you cut taxes and the government increases their spending to stimulate the economy. So the government cuts taxes and they spend more money. I'm going to get rid of that slide because I don't think that's right. We'll get to supply side economics in a little bit. So fiscal policy. How does it differ from monetary policy? Monetary policy basically deals with the monetary part of the fiscal policy, but it also refers to a system of banks that have been set up by the government. You'll notice on page 596, the Federal Reserve System. Now, at one time, our country had a federal bank. Remember that? It was set up during Washington's Washington's presidency. Alexander Hamilton, his Secretary of Finance, his Secretary of the Treasury, wanted a national bank. Thomas Jefferson did not want one. Remember that? And it was alive for 20 years. And then it came to an end. And then there was a second national bank for another 20 years. And when it ended, Andrew Jackson basically put an end to the national bank. Well, starting at the beginning of the 20th century, I believe, maybe the 19th century, we set up the Federal Reserve System. It is a series of 12 banks that basically tie into all the private banks. And the Federal Reserve banks are basically banks for the banks or the bankers. So if the local Farmers State Bank in Vian is having problems, they can get a loan from the Federal Reserve Bank that is in our area. And so monetary policy is this system of central banks using their tools to influence the economy by either shrinking or expanding the money supply. If they remove money from the economy, that can affect interest rates. If they print more money and add it, or if they've been withholding money and they add it, that can affect the interest rates. The objective of monetary policy is to stabilize prices, to help more people become employed, to see the economy grow, and try to have a favorable balance of payments. People who have to pay back loans, or companies that have to pay back loans. Make sure the balance that they owe is favorable. Here's the tools in the monetary policy toolbox. And since I'm not an economist, I'm not going to talk about them. All right, we'll stop there and finish section 3 on Friday. We will also try to finish chapter 17 on social policy. And I think the executive branch will share their goals or their platform for school lunches in the public schools. All right, any questions? Did Panama get their money for the candy?
I'm gonna go ask.
Okay. Any other questions?